welcome to The Buzz. On this episode, we'll be spreading seeds and fun facts. First, we will be starting at Kankakee Sands, where we will be teaming up with our Natural Resources Department to learn all about seeds. Then I'll break down some of our top What's the Difference questions. See how many you get right on this episode of The Buzz. The autumn season has so many things to highlight, like the leaves changing colors, mushrooms popping up on the forest floor, and birds migrating to their winter getaways. But one change is often overlooked: fall plants going into seed. So in September and October, we have the last of the prairie blooms like the goldenrods and the asters. And by November, pretty much everything has gone into seed. Seeds can come in many different shapes and sizes, my favorite being the fluffy ones, of those of the milkweed or the tops of goldenrods. Today we're going to take a look at how important seeds are not only to the ecosystem, but also the Forest Preserve mission. Seeds are essential for plants to continue their legacy, and the Forest Preserve takes advantage of the season by collecting the seeds and spreading them throughout different forest preserves throughout the county. Joining us today to share fascinating seed knowledge and to tell us where these seeds wind up are Natural Resources Management crew leaders Judith Wallace and Barbara Sherwood. We're here with Judith. Thank you for joining us again on The Buzz. And let's start off with where are we at and why is this a good preserve to collect seed?
Well, Susie, we are here at Kankakee Sands Preserve, and we're in one of our restoration fields that we started restoring in 2017, and it is turning out just fabulously. We have so many species just within 20-foot radius of where we're standing.
Yeah, you can really kind of look out, and when we're talking about seeds, see all the different, colors and textures, shapes and sizes.
Oh yeah, and what we like to do is when we have a field that is this far along in the restoration and has as many species as this one has, we can then use that as a collection field. And the seed that we collect here, we then take to newer restoration fields to get them going as well. This field used to be in agriculture, row crops, soybean, corn, etc., up until 2017. And that's when we took it out of agriculture and we planted it with seed in the winter of 2017 going into 2018, and a very methodical seed mix. So we ended up with a good combination of grasses as well as flowering plants, so it wouldn't be completely dominated with grasses. And I mean, this is just
look at it now, it's amazing.
Exactly, it's so good.
Is this a good season to collect seed, or do you collect it throughout the year, knowing that different plants probably seed at different times?
We do collect throughout the year. I mean, we start back in like May, where some of the earlier summer or spring bloomers are starting to set their seed, and we collect all the way through November sometimes if the weather holds, which it is this year. There is still so much seed out here to get. So what we do when we are doing our seed mapping, which means those of us in our Natural Resource Management Department, we're coming out throughout the season and we'll notice, hey, here's a great stand of switchgrass, or there's a bunch of ironweed. We use our technology on our phones to map it, and then we'll put in when we estimate it will be ripe, and we can very systematically go and collect.
Nice. And you're mentioning a lot of species. Are there certain ones that you target to collect versus maybe other ones that aren't as desirable?
Yes, we do. We actually, I'm going to pull out my little guide here, because we have, as I mentioned before, very systematic approaches where we don't want to end up with, I'm going to just demonstrate here, this is switchgrass, which is a very nice prairie plant, but we don't want to end up with a field of switchgrass.
All switchgrasses.
Right, or like here's a lot of the more common goldenrods too. So we don't want to collect a bunch of those and then not have more of our conservative species, and we want to get as much diversity as we can for insects and wildlife, birds, etc.
Sure.
And the reason why we use these systematic approaches is we have X amount of fields per year that we want to bring out of ag production and start restoring, right? So we look at the field, what the soil types are, and decide, okay, that's a drier field or a wetter field, and we can then target our seed collection to the soil types, the community types, what we know works together and what we know has worked in the past. Like this field, the seed mix that we used here is fabulous, as you can see.
Yeah.
You know, it's not overly dominated by grasses. It's got a lot of diversity. It's just excellent. So, you know, some of our very, very successful restorations we kind of use as a guide and build off of that. And that's how we generate these lists.
So you're talking about kind of the diversity in our forest preserves, the quality of the plants, and spreading them to other projects. Why don't we just buy a seed pack from a nursery versus spending all the time collecting it here?
We do sometimes purchase seed because we're not always able to collect the quantities we need. As you can see from my list here, sometimes other things take precedence over seed collecting. Sometimes the weather gets really
the
bad.
weather could take a turn.
We just can't get out there. The seed might end up, maybe some plants don't produce as much in a given year due to weather conditions, etc. We always try to make sure we buy seed that's within 100, 150 miles of where we're located. That's very important. So that seed is adapted for the preserves and the climate, the soil type that we are putting it in. But one very big reason why we do try to collect our own seed, especially from some of our remnant prairies and very, very high quality areas that weren't planted restorations, but they're actually remnant prairie or our old woodlands. We like to preserve that seed's genotype. We want to make sure those species are going to be maintained and then mixed in with other genotypes of seed that we might have bought in or collected elsewhere, and that will create more diversity overall. Native plants aren't just going to fill in on their own. They do need a helping hand by us planting seeds, sometimes planting plugs, because bare ground, any invasive is just going to move in,
take in
really quickly. So, you know, trying to get a really good matrix ground cover, a diversity of plants, doesn't give invasive species that bare ground to really take a hold. And talking about seed dispersal, yes, animals will eat the seed of non-native plants as well and disperse them. So it is a constant battle. But the better coverage we can have and the more natives we have to suppress the invasives, that's what we're going for.
That's how it kind of... So have you learned anything over the course of collecting seeds and replanting them? Are there studies being done or research of what works and what doesn't work?
Yes, definitely. A lot of the, like, say 1980s, 1990s prairie plantings, you know, we're planting a tall grass prairie, right? So grasses being a dominant species, those seed mixes were very, very heavily dominated by grass and grass alone. And then what happened was, even though some flowers or forbs were mixed in, the grasses dominated and just proliferated. And you'd end up with almost a monoculture just of like little blue stem and Indian grass, and it was determined that's not what we're going for.
That's not what you're looking for. Yeah.
We want diversity. You know, if you look back at what the historical prairies looked like, they weren't just all grass, right? So research started being done. People started being a little bit more careful in the approach as to their percentage of grasses and forbs being planted, and research is still going on all the time.
So we made it to a spot where I see 4 different plants in front of us with all different kinds of seeds. And I imagine there's different ways to go about collecting them, whether it's by hand or I see you have kind of clippers. What do you do for each species?
Yeah, well, it does depend on the species, as you pointed out, and how easily the seed comes off, what the seed heads are composed of. And I'll show you an example with the grass. This is Indian grass. We can just pull it right off. Same with little blue stem. Pull it right off. And then we go on to the Parthenium and Tigrifolium. That one is better if you just clip the whole seed head.
The whole head.
And you just clip. You know, we don't want to spend all day, so you can get pretty efficient.
Doing the individual little tops.
Exactly,
Just
like
take the whole
picking
thing.
one off. Exactly.
Yeah,
You clip the whole head and move on. Here is the Coreopsis palmata, and this is a real cute, tiny little seed head, and that's another one. It's more efficient to just clip the head, right? If there's not a lot in any one area, I'll say, I'm just going to put that back. I'm not going to keep it because we want this species to get a little bit more established before we start collecting. And when we collect, we're also mindful of like not taking it all. For example, with the Indian grass, you've got a big clump of Indian grass right in front of you, right?
Yeah.
So if I was collecting that, I would take maybe 40% off of the plant. We usually do about 40 to 60%, so we're not depleting all
Yeah, you're not
the
taking
seed.
all the seeds away from the
Exactly.
plant
Right.
that it can't
Just
do it itself.
like, yeah, exactly. Because then you come back next year, it's like, oh, where is everything?
Nothing grew back.
Yeah.
Weird.
Well, they are perennial, so they will come back, but they won't establish themselves as quickly because the seed will
They
be
won't
gone.
spread out because
Yeah.
they don't have seeds.
So I'd say the majority, we do use clippers. Like this is the round-headed bush clover. This is another one, very easy. You just clip the whole seed head. We've got my favorite goldenrod here, showy goldenrod. This is another one.
Oh, you
Clip
just take the whole thing.
Exactly, the whole thing. I mean, you could run your hand up it, but it doesn't come
Not
off
super
as
efficient.
easily.
Yeah.
And we do have machinery that cleans this for us. So we just bag it and then we can put that seed into our hammer mill machine and it separates it
And it
for
will
us.
kind of.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay, we collected the seed. What's the next step?
Okay, well, what we're collecting today, we first of all need to make sure we document
What we collected.
exactly what it is, where it came from, the date, you know, all very important data. So we bring out our labels, and I'll be filling this in with the species, what type of soil, where I collected it, the date, and we enter this, well, we weigh it, right? And we put those weights into our database, and then everything is tabulated according to soil type, very, very carefully looked at, and then it all gets mixed according to community type, soil type, what we need in a particular field, right? And then we go out and plant it, usually in the winter months, and we plant many times in the snow, and we use either machinery or hand broadcast. Okay. Yep, like a windy day today, you can just
let it out,
let it go, right? Yeah. So several different methods to disperse the seed, but yeah, very important that it's dried, it's cleaned, it's weighed, it's labeled, it's documented, put in the right mixture. You know, it's a series of steps. And it's really cool when we plant in the snow, you can see where the seed is in the snow. We make our tracks. We're very systematic how we drive back and forth or walk back and forth if we're hand dispersing. And we also track it on our phones so we can see exactly what parts of the field were planted. And it's amazing to watch.
We're here with Barbara, who is a natural resource management crew leader, but also is the volunteer liaison for the Natural Resources Department, and you'll see her at all the habitat management morning work days.
That's right.
So you want to give us more information about your work days? If people are interested in helping us collect seed, can they do so?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we offer a series of habitat management events throughout the year. We're out there every month, multiple times, 4 or 5 times a month. For seed collection, we usually offer a series from the end of August all the way through October, once a week. So we go to various preserves throughout the county, and we're targeting specific species.
Yeah.
So volunteers, they don't need any experience necessarily.
Perfect.
They've just got to be willing to go off trail and meander through a prairie.
Yeah, so you want to make sure you're dressed properly, but let me tell you, moment of zen in real life. It is so relaxing to find your plan and take the seeds off and just get in the zone, wander in a prairie. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Yes, I find seed collecting so peaceful. It's a great way to engage members from the community and then allow them to come out and connect with nature.
Now, if you have some native plants in your own yard, can you do this at home? Can you collect your own seed at home?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Any tips on how they should go about doing that, or what they do with the seed after, or like at home drying?
Oh, yeah. I do that in my own flower beds. Usually it's watching the seasonality. When is the seed ready? Collecting it at the right time. I use brown paper bags, put it in there, allow it to dry. You want it in a cooler, drier place to store it. I usually try and plant it later that same year.
Okay.
But I'll wait till winter, put it out in the areas where if I've collected it from here and I want it somewhere else in the yard, or want to share it with a neighbor, you know, find where we want it to be and try and find the right conditions. Is it a wet area? Is it a dry area?
The other thing I've been learning personally is like normally you would clean up your flower beds, make your neighbors happy, but that's new research to say maybe don't clean up your yards. Can you speak more to that?
Sure. Yeah. If you can leave the materials, the duff on the ground, the standing stems, there's insects that will bore into the stems or overwinter in the duff. Those are going to be our pollinators the next year. So you want to give them that opportunity. So you wait till late spring to clean up is the best way to go.
A big thank you to Judith and Barbara for sharing their incredible seed knowledge. For being such small things in nature, they have a huge job. Seeds are vital to make sure that we keep on getting those beautiful plants in the forest preserves, but they're also important to keep our restoration projects growing. And it doesn't have to stop there. You can help your backyard native plants by collecting your own seeds and spreading them out to your neighbors, your family, and friends.
The benefits are great when you invest in nature by donating to the Nature Foundation of Will County. You can help protect our precious habitats and restore natural areas back to their native state. Provide educational opportunities to unlock the natural world for present and future generations. Support diversity and inclusion so everyone can experience the magnificence of nature. The Nature Foundation works hand in hand with the Forest Preserve District of Will County to strengthen the commitment to land stewardship, nature education, wellness, cooperation, and sustainability. Donations large and small make a lasting and significant positive impact on the environment. Invest in nature and join our growing community. Support the cause at willcountynature.org.
Gathered are popular animals and habitats that often make people ask, what's the difference? They could have similar names or be similar in appearance that often lead to confusion and misidentification. So let's see how many you know of the differences between these animals and habitats. To start, all toads are frogs, but not all frogs are toads. No, that probably didn't clear up much, but basically, a toad is a type of frog. Both belong to the order Anurin, which means without a tail. This group also holds other frogs like tree frogs and true frogs. Now, all frogs and toads need water to lay eggs in and to live in as tadpoles. But as adults, toads tend to be on drier land, while frogs like to stick by the water bodies of wetlands and ponds. You can tell the difference between frogs and toads by looking at their legs and skin. So the legs of frogs are really long and the legs of toads are really short and squatty. So when you approach one, if you see a frog, it's going to leap long distances and probably making a big splash in the nearby water. However, if you stumble upon a toad, you're going to notice it's using more of its camouflage and it may hop, hop, hop away to find leaf cover. You can also look at their skin. Frogs have really smooth skin that they like to keep moist, where toads have drier, bumpier skin. They also have these huge bumps behind their eyes that are parotoid glands that can secrete toxins. And this is the toad's defense. If a predator picks it up, it can ooze out those toxins, taste really gross, and bleh, get spat out. These visually don't look that similar, but they do both have red heads, which can get confusing. They can also live in similar forested habitats and both visit your feeder to eat the seeds, suet, and peanuts. So first, let's start off with the red heads. Red-headed woodpeckers have a deep ruby red head, whereas the red-bellied woodpeckers have a more bright orangey red head. And their body patterns are pretty different as well. The red-headeds have black backs and bright white bellies with white wing patches. The red-bellied woodpeckers have black and white patterns on their back, like stripes, and their bellies are more of a cream color. Their lower belly has that iconic red patch, but you may not see it depending on how they're standing. These guys have a lot in common. They are both rodents. They both have brown, tans, and grays in their fur, and they're a similar length. Chipmunks are about 10 inches long, whereas the ground squirrels range from 6 to 12 inches long. And they're both out during the day, and during the fall, they're out storing food for the winter. The big difference is in the stripes. Chipmunks have 5 stripes that are wide down their bodies that alternate from tan to black. And I bet you can guess how many stripes the 13-line ground squirrels have. They have these 13 stripes on their heads and down their bodies. They do alternate colors, but the big clue is that they have dots kind of separating each line. This one gets confusing because of the names. So another name for cottonmouths is water moccasins, which I tend to hear everyone use for any snake that's in the water. What's important to know, out of the 7 different kinds of water snakes in Illinois, only the cottonmouth is venomous. The rest pose no risk to humans. When it comes to snakes, it's all about location. Cottonmouths are only found far south in Illinois. So if you see a snake in the water that looks similar here in Will County, it's a northern water snake. Besides the location, these snakes have a few physical clues as well. Northern water snakes tend to have a thinner, slimmer body, where cottonmouths tend to have a thicker, heavier body. Also take a look at their necks. Cottonmouths usually have a neck that is narrower than their blocky heads, where northern water snakes have a flat, slim head that flows with their body. We never recommend getting close to any animal's face, but if you look at all of our venomous snakes in Illinois, they are considered pit vipers, and they'll have pits on their faces. These are large holes that are located between their eyes and their nostrils, and they can detect heat of their prey. If you also look at the pit viper family, they have elliptical pupils instead of the round ones like other snakes have. This is one where I hear those terms used interchangeably to describe a part of a butterfly's life cycle. But in fact, there's actually 2 different structures used for 2 different insects. So only butterflies can transition into a chrysalis, and only moths can transition into a cocoon. A chrysalis is essentially the insect, but in a whole new form. The pupa has a hard exoskeleton on the outside, and on the inside, there's cells and goo that are transforming into that butterfly. So for example, in the case of a monarch butterfly, it takes about 12 days for those cells and building blocks to transform into that butterfly where you can see through the hard chrysalis case. A cocoon is more of a warm hoodie. It gets spun from silk and fibers and wraps around the pupa inside. So if you break it open, you'll see kind of a caterpillar form pupa that's changing from the inside out. So essentially, a cocoon is something that wraps around the pupa, where the chrysalis is the pupa. What's the difference between marshes, swamps, and wetlands? I tend to use wetland as an overarching term for any water bodies. And wetlands can include lots of classifications like swamps, marshes, bogs, lakes, ponds, and so forth. Some of these water bodies may be permanently wet while others may dry up with the seasons. And there are some unique traits per wetlands that will break them down into specific categories. First, let's look at plant life. Marshes have rich waterlogged soils that grow plants and grasses, whereas swamps are more forested by trees. And the type of swamp depends on what trees are growing. So there could be hardwood swamps versus cypress swamps. To get the term swamp, the low part of the forest has to have deep standing water and be wet for a long period of time. Marshes get broken down into tidal freshwaters, tidal saltwater, and inland freshwater. Since Will County is nowhere near a coastline, all of our marshes are inland freshwaters found on the banks of rivers and streams. Fun fact, the most famous marsh in the United States is the Everglades. Is one more a storybook term and the other one more technical, or can they be used interchangeably? Well, looking at their definitions, there is a slight difference. By looking at Webster's New World Dictionary, woods is defined as a grove of trees, whereas forest is defined as a growth of trees and underbrush that extend a tract of land. Other classification systems, like the U.S. National Vegetation Classification, looks at tree canopy cover. So in a forest, you need 60 to 100% of tree canopy covering the land, whereas in woods, it's only 25 to 60%. Basically, a forest is a bigger, denser area of trees, but this one's a pretty nitpicky description of the difference. Even us in the forest preserves like to use the term woods to describe our large forested areas, like Hamel Woods, Messenger Woods, and McKinley Woods. How did you do? Did you know that a frog's skin is smoother than a toad's? Or that not all water snakes are called water moccasins? Well, we hope that you have some new fun facts to break out at trivia or maybe share while you're walking the preserves. And if you liked knowing what the differences are, make sure to check our website for more articles in this series. Fall is a chance for our autumn blooms to spread their seeds. We hope you take a second look at all those fluffy, exploding, and hitchhiking seeds on your next walk. And if you choose one of our preserves, I hope you share all your what's the difference fun facts with your friends. Ask them what's the difference between a swamp or a marsh, or see what term they use to describe an area with tons of trees. Map your next adventure at reconnectwithnature.org to find more nature articles and preserves to explore. I hope to see you out spreading seeds to others, but until then, I'll see you next time on The Buzz.